Okay, so now we want to go through section 2.4, chemical reactions and enzymes. We've talked a fair amount about atoms, elements, compounds, and now we want to talk about how compounds can form from more simple constituents, basic compounds. And so in your basic chemical reactions, you of course have reactants and products. The reactants are what are getting together, if you will, to form a product. And so for here for example, we have a relatively simple chemical reaction. We've got carbon dioxide and water reacting to form this substance, this molecule called carbonic acid. Um, so if we just look at this side of the equation, we have a equation where we're going from relatively simple molecules up to larger ones. Now you can also have the reverse reaction in which carbonic acid breaks down to form carbon dioxide and water, where you're going from a more complex molecule to simpler molecules. So they can often go either way. In fact, um, we would describe this reaction as basically a reversible reaction. We can draw it with a double-sided arrow showing the reaction can go either way depending on the given conditions. Um, and like I said, carbon dioxide and water are the reactants in this case. Carbonic acid is the product, except of course in the reverse reaction where carbonic acid is the reactant and CO2 and water are the products. So again, reactants and products, it all depends on which direction the reaction is going. Now, reactions tend not to just proceed on their own. They often need help. And what helps them are these things called enzymes. And enzymes are involved with modifying the amount of energy it takes to get a reaction going. Because when you have a reaction that is essentially taking in energy, or reactions that release energy, in either case, there is what is called this activation energy, this energy hill that's necessary to get that you essentially have to get over to get the reaction to proceed. Um, so for example, the reaction that goes from CO2 and water to carbonic acid is one where you go from relatively simple molecules to a larger one, and after the reaction, energy has been taken into the system. It basically takes energy to go from these simpler molecules to this more complex one. And these kind of reactions in biology, we call these endergonic reactions, ones where energy is entering the system. The reverse, H2CO3 to H2O and CO2, would be one that releases energy. That is, the reactant, in this case, the carbonic acid, has more energy than is found in the two products, H2O and CO2. And this is known as an exergonic reaction. Energy is exiting the system. Um, Now, in either case, again, you have this activation energy that's needed to get the reaction to go. Um, and think of it this way. Reactions tend not to just happen automatically. They need assistance, and this is a particularly useful thing in living systems because you don't want reactions just occurring sort of in a random fashion. You want to be able to control when they happen. And so it's by manipulating the activation energy, that is the energy needed to get the reaction to, whoops, what is going on here? to proceed is necessary to control whether or not these reactions happen. All right, how do enzymes help facilitate these reactions? And that's what enzymes essentially are. They are molecules that facilitate reactions, Rx and S. That's my short for reactions. Okay, so here is an exergonic reaction. That is, the products have less energy than the reactants. The energy that's released in the reaction is referred to as free energy, or it's the energy, I should say, that's basically available to do something, to do work, if you will. So here's our hill, our activation energy. And what happens is, in the absence of enzymes, the activation energy, the hill, is much higher than in the presence of the enzymes. And so in the presence of the enzymes, because the activation energy is lower, the reaction is much more likely to proceed, or it proceeds much more easily than in their absence. And in either case, if we look up above here, an enzyme is going to basically lower that activation energy, making it much more likely that the reaction again is going to proceed, whether it's an endergonic or exergonic reaction. Okay, now how do enzymes do their job? Well, again, they are molecules that facilitate reactions, and so in this case, we're taking two reactants, these two molecules here, and making a single product out of them. And what happens is enzymes have this one particular part of them, and this again is sort of a cartoonish image, but it's known as the active site. And the reactants fit just so into the active site, and the enzyme manipulates those reactants, and in this case is helping them to bond together to form this product. Now the reverse reaction would involve perhaps a different enzyme that takes in the product and helps to break those two apart, releasing the two smaller molecules. But in each case, an enzyme is going to have an active site where the reactants are being reacted upon by the enzyme, or acted upon by the enzyme, you might say. Now, so these enzymes facilitate reactions, but you only want enzymes really doing their job when it's necessary. And so it's important that enzymes are regulated. So the enzymes have an active site, and so there are these compounds known as inhibitors here, and there are some types of inhibitors that bind to the enzyme in a spot other than the active site, but in doing so, they make it such that the substrate cannot bond with the active site. And those are known as non-competitive inhibitors, as we see here. But then there are other types of inhibitors that bind with the active site of the enzyme and essentially prevent the substrate from getting in to the active site. So again, we have non-competitive inhibitors that basically bind to the enzyme in a spot other than the active site, make the enzyme inactive, or competitive inhibitors that bind to the active site and again sort of disable the enzyme such that it can't do its job. So enzymes can also be regulated in whether they are present or not. So if a particular enzyme is needed to facilitate a reaction, your body will produce that enzyme often. And if it's not needed, the enzymes will typically be broken down so you're not having them around when they're not needed. So that's another way we can regulate the activity of enzymes. Okay, that's it for section 4. We'll talk about this a bit in class.